Hi guys, my GCSE revision here today. What we're going to be looking at is the money market. We're going to be looking at the money supply diagram and its interaction with the interest rate. We're going to be looking at the demand for money and its interaction with the interest rate as well. So on this diagram, as we can see, what we're going to start off with is the money supply. So let's label our axes first. So on the x-axis, what we're going to have is the quantity of money. Let's go quantity of money. And on the y-axis, we're going to have interest rate. I'll just put IR for short. So there's two approaches to look at this. The first approach is we can look at the monetarist approach, which is an adaptation from the classical approach back in the 1930s. The monetarist approach is saying for laissez-faire, which is no government interaction into the markets, only interaction by keeping the money supply constant. So, and for that reason, the monetarists, led by Friedman, would argue that the quantity of money is not affected by interest rate, and what we'll call this is exogenous or independent. And as a result, what we would see is a vertical money supply line, unaffected by the interest rate and any other factors. And we can see this by we can draw a line here. And let's just call that QE, IE. And let's say there was an increase in interest rate. This would not change money supply, according to the monetarists. But this has been hotly debated, and it's not entirely true, because if you're on the political right wing, a Keynesian supporter, would argue that it is endogenous and highly affected by interest rate. So let's draw the graph over here. Once again, quantity of money. Excuse my handwriting. And interest rate. And because it's endogenous and affected by interest rate, what we'll do is we'll draw money supply going up like that. And therefore, as you can see, let's draw our equilibrium point on. I know we haven't got our demand curve on yet, but we'll do that later. QE. And if there was, let's say, an increase in the money supply or increased demand, what we would see is an increase in interest rates and an increase in the quantity supplied of money by the banks. So why did the Keynesians believe this? So the Keynesian believes this because when there's a higher demand for money, what that means is more people are going to pile their money into the bank, and if there's more money piled into the bank, there's going to be a higher interest rate. Why is there going to be a higher interest rate? Because people are going to prefer to see a higher return on their money. So a higher interest rate is going to give you a higher return. So that's one of the reasons. The next reason is if there's a higher interest rate, people are going to want to put more money into their banks, and they're going to be more willing to leave their money in that bank for a longer period. So what we can do is they change from sight accounts, which means you can withdraw your money straight away from the bank, so fairly liquid, and we can go to time account, which are slightly less liquid, more illiquid, and this means that you have to give the bank notice when you want to take your money out, potentially a higher interest rate. So we'll see a lower volume of these sight accounts and a higher volume of these time accounts. So that's a basic overview of the money market with the monetarist view and the Keynesian view. Next, what we're going to look at is the demand for money. The demand for money is determined by three ways. First being the transition motive. The transition motive is when people only receive money at specific time intervals, let's say weekly or monthly. Therefore, they're required to hold their balances of cash to afford goods or services that they wish during the month. The next one is the precautionary motive, and the precautionary motive is mainly through individuals holding their money for precautionary reasons, such as their car breaking down in a month, a power cut in their house, which means they have to hire an electrician. So this money is just for precautions, and with these two, they have their own specific demand curve, which is slightly different to the third reason we're going to talk about. But let's first draw this on a graph. So once again, we'll go quantity of money at the bottom, put interest rates, and so for this one, I'll draw in a different colour. What we're going to see is a shape a bit like this. We'll call this L1. For just talking about these two, we can call them the transition plus precautionary demand for money. And we can actually use, on the x-axis, we can call this the active balance. So the determinants of this curve is national income. So if someone has a higher national income, they're going to probably have more transitional motive, they're going to have a more precautionary motive. And therefore, if let's say national income did rise, what we would see is a shift in this curve. Another determinant is the frequency of payments. If a firm or an individual is receiving more frequent payments, let's say rather than monthly, now receiving it weekly, there is no need to hold as much cash, which would further increase the demand for money. So next, we'll look at the final part of the demand for money curve, which is what we call the speculative or asset motive. And what this is let's say a big company is looking to invest into the stock market, but they have been given information that the price of this stock they are looking at is going to fall in the future. So currently they've taken all this money out in the bank, they've got it in cash reserves or cash equivalents, and what they're doing is they're waiting for the correct price to buy out. So they're sitting on all this money, and in the meantime it's not in the bank, it's not making any money. So there's an opportunity cost involved of the interest rate in the bank. But as a result, because this money's sat idle, we can draw this on a graph. And because it's idle, we can call it idle balance. And obviously interest rates again. And we can draw this graph here. Call this L2. And now let's draw our other graph, our transition plus precautionary demand curve, which would look a bit like this. Call this L1. And we have to add these two up, which will give us our final graph, our final demand curve, which looks a lot like this. These two slightly overlap at the bottom. And what we would, I've drawn that a little bit, let me rub that out. What we would call this L1 plus L2. And that will be the demand curve for money. And if we were to finally put this on a graph with the money supply, the Keynesian money supply, so let's put quantity, money, interest rates. So we'll draw the Keynesian money supply on here, and the money market demand curve, call that L, what we'll see is equilibrium at this point here, where they intersect. So that has been the money market supply and demand curve. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.